Welcome back. I'm glad you returned to this bench. Yesterday, I left you with a number that haunts me, $835,000. That is the literal price tag of my hesitation. But today, I want to go deeper than the math and want to talk about why a young man with a steady job and a beautiful wife would look at a golden opportunity and run the other direction. In 1965, the world felt like it was shifting under our feet. We were in the middle of a post-war boom, but if you grew up where I did, you didn't trust the boom. You waited for the bust. I walked past a small white colonial house every day on my way to the post office. For sale sign that sat in the front yard for 3 months. $12,000. To you, that sounds like the price of a used car. To me, in 1965, that was 2.5 years of my entire life's labor. I would stand on the sidewalk and look at the porch, wondering if they were home. I can still picture Martha sitting right there. Usually had a glass of that homemade lemonade with her. I could see the kids playing in the yard. But then the string drawer in my mind would open. I'd hear my mother's voice talking about the tents in 1933. I'd think about the $18 a week my father struggled to make. I convinced myself that by saying no to that house, and I was being the responsible one. And I didn't realize I was actually trapping her in a cycle of rent that would never end. Martha wanted that house. She didn't care about the market or the interest rates. She cared about the color of the shutters and having a kitchen where she didn't have to bump into me every time she turned around. Our rent was $95 a month. That was a lot of money back then, I remember. The mortgage on that $12,000 house, even with the insurance and taxes of the time, was going to be $22. We'd be saving $13 a month, she said, her eyes shining. We could put that toward the kids' college, but I couldn't see the $13 saved. I could only see the $12,000 owed. I was a child of the Depression, and to me, was a cage. I told her, what if the post office cuts hours? What if the steel mills in Pittsburgh shut down and the whole economy collapses? I used logic to mask my terror. I made her feel like her desire for a home was reckless. But the way I dampened her spirit because I was too afraid to be brave. I watched the light go out of her eyes when I finally said, no, we're staying put. It's safer this way. We stayed in that rental for another 7 years. 7 years of paying someone else's mortgage while our own future sat on a shelf gathering dust. Then there was Tom. Tom worked the window next to me at the post office. He wasn't a numbers guy. He didn't have a string drawer in his kitchen. And when he heard I passed on the house, he didn't even hesitate. He bought it the next week. I remember eating lunch with him and saying, "Tom, you're crazy. You're tying yourself down. What if the world ends tomorrow?" "Bob, if the world ends tomorrow, I won't have to worry about the mortgage anyway. But if it doesn't, at least I'll have a roof that belongs to me." I watched him move in. I watched him paint those shutters. I watched his kids grow up in the yard I had imagined for my own. While I was playing it safe in a cramped apartment, Tom was building equity. Every month he paid that $82, he was buying back a piece of his freedom. I was just buying another 30 days of permission to live in someone else's building. But because he wasn't afraid of a mountain that turned out to be a molehill. And hear young people today saying the same things I said in 1965. The prices are too high. I can't afford it. The world is too unstable. And you know what? You're right. It is expensive. It is unstable. But it was impossible for me in 1965 too. And $12,000 was more than double my annual salary. Today, that's like a house costing $150,000 when you make $60,000. It felt like an unreachable dream back then, just like it feels for you now. But the math of regret doesn't care about your excuses. When Tom's kids sold that house for $847,000 last year, they didn't care that their dad was reckless in 1965. They cared that they had an inheritance that changed their lives. They cared that they had a foundation. And I paid twice as much for half the yard. It wasn't just the $835,000 I lost. It was the roots. When you rent, you're a guest in your own life. You don't paint the walls the color you love because you'll just have to paint them back to rental beige when you leave. Martha lived in that beige apartment for 7 years longer than she had to. We moved 3 times in those 7 years because the landlords kept raising the rent or selling the buildings. Each move was a trauma for the kids. New schools, new friends, neighborhood, and I was miserable every time we had to load up a moving truck. So here is the lesson from the $12,000 house I didn't buy. Fear is the most expensive thing you will ever own. It will take your money, it will take your time, and it will take your peace of mind. My mother's drawer of string was a beautiful way to survive the Depression. I eventually learned to stop counting string, but it took a tragedy to shake me awake. It took seeing a man who did everything right lose it all in a single afternoon. See you back here tomorrow. So far, so good.